I tell you that story because I don't want you to think that I'm a man who grew up in the ways of the military. But I did have the opportunity, once I was commissioned, to command at all levels. From a platoon of about 30 to a corps of about 65,000. And my last job in the Army was commanding all the Army installations with a workforce of about 120,000 people. And in that time, I learned a lot about leadership. And in that time, I learned a lot about leadership as applies to a safety program, and I'd like to share with you my thoughts and ideas. Number one, it's all about leadership. Leaders have to own the safety program. I mean, what I saw today was magnificent. But candidly, I've seen it in many different corporations around the world. It's what you're supposed to do for safety. And I say amen. The question is, how do you execute it? How does it really happen where the rubber meets the road? And it's all about you. It's all about the leaders who embrace this idea of safety being a leadership issue. And I'm going to give you some ideas on how you can implement that. It's also about commitment. I loved hearing the phrase today, commitment. We're going to commit to this safety program. And I love the idea of trying to be the best in the world of safety. So let me give you some ideas. First off, you got to know Lynch is the guy who believes that all accidents are predictable and preventable. All accidents are predictable and preventable if you're an engaged leader. Now, there's a lot of folks who don't believe that. In fact, in the video, I heard folks talk about accidents happen. There's a whole population of people who believe that's true. I don't believe that's true. And I learned that lesson the hard way in November of 1993. I was battalion commander. And I was convinced that we had a pretty good safety program for the tank battalion I led. There was about 500 soldiers in my battalion. We put a lot of safety SOPs in place, a lot of safety checks, commander's toolbox kind of stuff. But one day in November 1993, Private Centeno, who was a trained 5-ton wrecker operator, decided he was going to take the wrecker out of the motor pool. All the checks and balances were in place. He was properly trained. The vehicle had been properly dispatched. He had all the proper safety equipment with him, so he was able to leave the motor pool. He had in the cab with him Specialist Michael Wagner. Once they got out of the motor pool, Centeno and Wagner says, hey, here's a deal. Wagner, why don't you drive? Wagner wasn't licensed. Wagner wasn't equipped, but they made that conscious decision at that point in time to switch the seats, and Wagner was the driver. Going too fast around a curve, not properly trained or licensed, 5-ton wrecker flips, Michael Wagner dies. In the Army, and you alluded to it today, I think you're doing something very similar as you work your way through action reportings to the family. In the Army, what you have is what's called a casualty notification officer. And I could have delegated that task to a whole bunch of other leaders in my battalion. I said, no, we're going to do that ourselves. So I called Sarah, I called my chaplain, I donned my Class A uniform, and we went to Michael Wagner's house, knocked on the door. Tony Wagner answered the door, baby in her hands, and I informed her that her husband had been killed in a training accident, a vehicle accident. She almost dropped the baby, and we worked our way through that. I tell you that because it's critical to know that you're not as good as you think you are with your safety program. It's all about the individuals. It's all about the people out there doing the right thing, doing whatever they think is right. I asked 3 questions when I was in the Army. I ask it to this day. Are we doing the right things, number 1? Are we doing things right, number 2? And what are we missing? I argue that safety ought to be treated as a value. Not as a task, but as a value. A value is something that you're going to do regardless of who's watching.